I would like to introduce our evening's speaker. So I think, how many of you here have heard Chris before? So back by popular demand. So I have to say, Chris is just a wonderful writer and a wonderful pillar of our community for both history and also for telling those untold stories. And both as an author and as a historian, she just does a fantastic job of everything. So would you believe it? She has written an unbelievable 58 books now. She is an award-winning author, multiple awards by the nationally recognized Will Rogers Medallion Awards. So well done, Chris, for all of that and for everything that you do with the community. Thank you so much, Chris Enss.
It's always so wonderful to come and be a part of this particular speaker's event, and I just thank you so much for your attention and for allowing me to come back. I think I'm on the roster. Didn't somebody cancel? And that's why I'm here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I love history, and I think it is just phenomenal that we live in a community where individuals like ourselves embrace history and want to do everything we can to preserve it. If we don't do that, if we don't hold on to our history, we're destined to lose it. And so it's very, very important for us to constantly revisit it and tell these amazing stories and to share. I have been doing this for a very long time. I've been writing for 35 years. So when Dom says something like, I've written 58 books, if you cram everything you did together in one, it looks like you did something. But I think if you spread it out and be like, well, that's good. But I love writing about women of the American West. And the story that I'm going to share with you this evening is about a woman of the American West, but instead of six gun, just cross that out and put Tommy gun. Because we're going to be talking about the 1930s. Now, I forgot I'm in charge of this. And I don't really even know what I'm doing. Dom, you gave me instructions, but oh look, there we go. I figured it out. The book is called Meet the Kellys. And it's about the life of Machine Gun Kelly. Anybody ever heard of Machine Gun Kelly? Not the rapper. I know. Younger kids always say the rapper. No, not the rapper, for crying out loud. I don't have anything in common with anybody over 1920. I mean, I have more in common with the pioneers than anybody in this century. So, but we are going to start talking about, we're going to start our story here with this young woman. Her name was Geraldine Arnold. And in the fall of 1934, Geraldine Arnold was traveling around the country, and she would be at movie theaters, and a movie would come up, and the movie was called Sucker's Money. And the movie, is it too bright? Is it too bright?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's too bright. Okay. We're lowering them. We're not done. We're getting that done. We won't go on until you are happy. Okay. As I said, in the fall of 1934, there was a movie that was playing across the United States called Sucker Money. How many people ever heard of Sucker Money? Did you hear of Sucker Money? God bless you. Sucker Money was all about how to avoid people taking money from you, ripping you off, stealing things from you. And it was directed by one of the very first women in Hollywood to direct and produce her own film. Her name was Deirdre Rainer. Now, it wasn't just enough that she was showing Sucker Money. When Sucker Money had an intermission, this young lady would come up. She's 13 years old.
I think she was 26.
I know. The 30s aged people quite rapidly. But she's only 13 years old in this picture. Now, The reason why she was front and center in the intermission, she would come out and she would tell about when she was kidnapped by Machine Gun Kelly and his wife, Catherine Thorne. The authorities were looking for a couple. They were looking for a family. So they kidnapped this young woman. And they took her cross country when they're trying to get away from the law. And Geraldine, I mean, they paid her parents. So, you know, it wasn't like their parents, but they didn't bring her back. So I think they probably were happy with that. But anyway, this was Geraldine Arnold. As I said, she's 12, she's 13 in this picture, but she was 12 when they kidnapped her and took her across the country. And so she would get up and she would start telling her story about what it was like, because in the 1930s, 1932 was when Machine Gun Kelly just gets started in the business. He's a bank robber, he's a bootlegger, and happy to be so. He's born in Chicago, and his family moves to Memphis, Tennessee. And he comes from a very wealthy, upper middle class family. The last person that you think is going to be a gangster. Very wealthy parents. He goes to the University of Tennessee. He's studying business because he was a good businessman. His father was an insurance salesman. And his mother was a stay-at-home mom, of course, it was the 30s. And his mother was she had a lot of health problems. And one time, George caught his father with another woman, and he was furious about that for his mother. And his father said, please don't tell her. She already has a heart condition. I don't want you to say anything. And Kelly said, I will not say a single word if you let me use the vehicle to take booze in and out of this county. He's 15. He's 15. He was going door to door asking people if they liked alcohol. Because, you know, there was prohibition days. And so he would go to these places who were mixing up hooch, they'd jar it, and then he would take it with him. So he was a bootlegger, but he was broken when he found his father was having this affair. And so from that moment that his father had, I mean, that's just an excuse. I mean, you want to be a thug, you're a thug. But that was his excuse at the time. That his father was having an affair, and so he becomes a thug by the time he starts in college, but he drops out of college because he's making more money running booze. Now, also he starts robbing gas stations. He's a small-time hood, and he's quite gorgeous. In a few moments you're going to see a picture of him. I think he's quite handsome. He could have done anything, and he does that, but he married badly. So, and isn't that the way with a lot of us? So, that made it sound like I have married badly. It's not that. It's just that my husband is retired and I can kill him. So, what is really important in the 30s, and what is significant with the Meet the Kellys book, is this gentleman here. Anybody know who this is? It's J. Edgar Hoover, who was a really brilliant individual. His brilliance gets lost in all of his crazy cross-step dressing that he did later on in his life. And it kind of diminishes how smart he was. But he comes on the scene in the 30s when the country is just rife with people stealing from banks. Now, when the Kellys get into the business, they've got a lot of competition. They're in business with, they're competing against Capone. They're competing against Bonnie and Clyde. They're competing against Vern Miller, John Dillinger. Dillinger was only in business for 13 months. Doesn't seem like Dillinger's life of crime went on for several years, but it was only 13 months. So they are competing in that particular arena. And when George is robbing banks, he and his gang had to be very selective about the banks that they're going to steal from because it's the 30s. There's a lot of banks that don't have anything there. And so you've got to really find a bank that has some money in it. And when you get there, maybe Bonnie and Clyde have already been there, so now there's nothing. But they were getting shot at a lot. And so George didn't really particularly care for that line of work because you're not getting shot at as much if you're a bootlegger. And people like you. But then you've got this gentleman who comes on the scene who is tasked, who's given this monumental task of being able to get all of these gangsters corralled and arrest them. The other group that they were competing against was Ma Barker and their boys. Lots and lots of people rose to the top. But Machine Gun Kelly and his wife Catherine make history because Hoover has got to prove his point. He has got to really make sure that he is not fired, and so he is going to set an example, and the two people that he decides he's going to set an example on are Machine Gun Kelly and his wife. Let me tell you about her. She's a peach. First of all, this is not her. But all of this starts, you've got lots of trouble cooking with the gangsters anyway and robbing banks. But the biggest crime of the 30s was the kidnapping of this little boy. This is a Lindbergh baby. Lindbergh baby is kidnapped in the fall of 1932. They don't find anybody to arrest until the fall of 1934. Now, the pressure is on Hoover. You better figure out who took this baby because Lindbergh was very popular, but he was a hero. Stone cold Nazi, but nonetheless, he was a hero. And what happened to his child was amazing. I mean, the little boy, we now know that the little boy was killed, not when he died. I mean, I think coming down the ladder, he was dropped and he died then. But they spent all of this time, they spent lots of time looking for the child, and he was already dead and buried in the woods, not too terribly far from their home. But no one knows that. So they're looking all over the place, and the first people that they accuse of kidnapping the Lindbergh baby is Machine Gun Kelly and his wife. Now we get to, aren't they a happy couple? Don't they look nice? These are the people that you want to have dinner with. This is Catherine Thorne. Catherine Thorne is born and raised in a place called Paradise, Texas. Anybody been there? It's not too far from Fort Worth. I wanted to call the book Outlaws in Paradise. But they said, no, it will be called Meet the Kellys. And I said, okay. But she is born and raised in a little town called Paradise, Texas. And her stepfather, Boss Shannon, is a bootlegger. Not only is he a bootlegger, but he and his wife have this remote farm that any criminal, any bank robber, anybody that robbed a gas station, anybody looking to get away from the law can pay the Shannons to hide out at their place. So they're making money in a variety of ways off of these outlaws. They're home, and we're going to see that in a minute. Catherine's aunt is a prostitute.
So what a family. God.
Yeah, it's not. You don't want to go for that family reunion, but that's exactly the kind of atmosphere that she's brought up in. So she knows criminality. She knows how much money can be made from being a criminal. She loved fine things in life. She loved fine clothes. She loved jewelry. How is she going to get it in this little paradise place? And so she seeks out these different gangsters that come to the house. Some of them are very influential. One was a guy by the name of Steve Stevenson. I have no idea why his parents would name him the same name as the last name, but be that as it may, Steve Stevenson was a big deal. He was a big outlaw, big deal. He competed with Capone in a lot of things. She was with Steve Stevenson, and they were in Chicago. He came out to the Shannon farm to hide out. They kind of spark with one another. She goes off with Steve. This is after she's already been married twice, and you'll read in the book where there's some question about whether or not she killed her second husband. They find him dead with a suicide note, which was very odd because he was illiterate. So, but anyway, she's ambitious. She wants a lot out of life. And so, she hooks up with George. And not too long after, this isn't George, I'll tell you who this is in a minute. She hooks up with George, and not too long after they meet, they get married, and she tells him her plan. I want to live a really high-end life. And if you can't supply that to me, George, I will go somewhere else. Now, by high-end life, let me explain to you that in the 30s, high-end life meant really amazing clothing and all the accoutrements that went with those clothes. And you'll read about that in the book, which is going to bring me to this little display that I have up here. I absolutely adored Madeline Helling. And a couple of years before Madeline died, she gave me all her monkey fur. I know, you're thinking, that sounds really gross. And believe me, it is.
That's unique.
But what is important about it is, one of the things that Catherine Thorne wanted was monkey fur. And how lucky am I that I have monkey fur? So, let me explain to you what Catherine wanted to do with the monkey fur. Here's the monkey fur. Yes, you'll ask, is it really monkey? Yes, it is really monkey. Okay? Now, no, I don't know what it is, but it's monkey. So, what you would do in the 30s is, your everyday dress, which might be silk, that's fine if you wore it like that, but if you were going out on a night out of town, as Catherine wanted to do, you would sew this monkey fur at the bottom of your dress. I'm a giant woman, so it wouldn't work for me. But Catherine was a tiny thing, so you'd have monkey fur around the bottom of your dress, you'd have monkey fur around your collar, and monkey fur around your cuffs. This was wealth. Madeline didn't see it that way. Madeline thought this was a disgusting thing. It belonged to Madeline's mother. And I think it's great that here we are. I get to use it and we get to talk about Madeline. Or I do. You guys don't. But Madeline was pretty amazing if you didn't know her. She was great. And so, here's to Madeline. And so, when Kate gets married to George, she does some bootlegging with George, because again, she wants money, she wants monkey fur. So they not only do they bootleg together, but they rob gas stations together. And he's robbing banks when she's at home. He's not really getting a lot from the banks, and I told you why. The competition was really fierce. And they were getting shot at. And Kate said, I don't think that the reward is worth the risk. So I am going to start going through the society pages of all of the newspapers. And we are going to find the wealthiest people in the United States. And our goal will be to kidnap them. Which is not unusual. It's the same thing that Ma Barker and her boys did. It's the same thing that Vern Miller and his gang did. People really figured that out. Ma Barker and her boys kidnapped Ham out of Ham's Brewery, out of Milwaukee, and got a lot of money for that. A lot of times, these people would be kidnapped, they got a ransom, and maybe only 10% of the ransom was ever recovered. So somewhere across this great wide world, there was money stashed somewhere. Start looking, people. So, Catherine happens on to a story about this particular gentleman and his wife. This is the Mr. and Mrs. Charles Urschel out of Oklahoma City. He is a very prominent banker in Oklahoma City. They have lots and lots of money, but it's not Charles's money, it's his wife's money. She inherited it from her family, but they have lots of money. And newspapers come and they do stories about this couple. They go into their home, they photograph their home. They find out how much money that they have, and they put that in the paper. You're not thinking anything about this in the 30s, that's something that you don't want to do. These people had a life that was an open book. So they shared about the trips that they took abroad and what they did with their children and how many homes that they have. So Catherine reads about the Urschels and says to George, get the boys together, we're going to take them out. I think the next picture is over. This is their home in Oklahoma City.
Wow.
Now, that was 1933. Great house, you know, there's not a good picture around back of it. Around the back of it, they had this great open solarium, and they would go back there and play cards. And so one evening, the Urschels had a couple of friends over, and they were playing cards. And George and his partner, Bates, come in, and they point a gun at both of the men, and they ask, which one of you is Charles Urschel? Neither one of them says anything. So George takes them both. He takes them both, and he blindfolds them, tapes their ears shut, and then he and his partner go off with them. They do that because they didn't want them to know where they were taking them. But Charles Urschel turns out to be one of the smartest men going because he counts. The minute in his car, he counts. How far are we going? We stopped here. He's making a mental note of all of this. When they get halfway out of town, they finally are able to determine which one is Charles, and they kick the other guy out and make him walk back to town. But now the press is everywhere wanting to know what happened to Charles, and this is where he's at. He is in the Shannon's home in Paradise, Texas. But this is not, he's not in that house yet. He's in a barn or a garage outside of the house on the floor of the car. They finally pull him out and bring him into a room. They chain him to a bed. And of course, they've taken the material out of his ears, but he starts to listen to all of the livestock and starts to make a mental note of the livestock. And there's planes that go over. And every time a plane goes over, he asks his captors, who are Catherine's parents and brother and sister-in-law, are the people that are guarding him. He asks them what time it is. So he makes a mental note of every time a plane goes over. It's going to be important here in a few moments. But nobody's out over in this part of the country, in Texas, except other gangsters. So no other gangster is going to give you up to say, oh, they're holding this guy hostage. They're not going to do that. So, this is Catherine's family. That's her father, Boss, on the end. This is, oh good gosh, nope, that's not it. Where's the pointer? Where's the...
Oh, the top.
The top one. That's her father, Boss. He's a stepfather. Her real father took off with a prostitute. So again, really great life. This is her mother. This is Catherine right there. Look at those cheekbones. It's Catherine right there. That's the dress that she used to put the monkey fur around. That's her sister-in-law. And that's her attorney. That's their attorney. This is after they were arrested. Isn't that nice? Because often when you are accused of a major crime, you like to be photographed with the family and your attorney. But this was the 1930s. And this was more of a show for Catherine than it was anything else. Catherine was gorgeous. Tiny little thing, and she was on the cover of all kinds of newspapers, magazines. People were fascinated with her. How could someone like that, look like that, be a stone cold criminal? But of course she definitely was that, and she definitely had a hand in planning taking the Urschels, and was there when she had a home in Fort Worth, and would go back and forth from Fort Worth to her parents' home. What's amazing about Catherine is, with her first marriage, she has a little girl. But she doesn't raise her little girl, she gives them to her parents to raise. Because she wants to be wealthy and have monkey fur. She can't have a kid hanging around with her son. When I was doing the research, I found Catherine's grandson. He's a real estate agent in New Jersey. And asked him if he would talk to me about his grandmother. He was highly offended and hung up on me. He insisted that she was terribly misunderstood. But you'll see in the book that that was not the case. That her fingerprints was on everything that happened. But she could get away with it because of the way that she looked. I love going through all the FBI files, because in order to write this book, I had to fill out the Freedom of Information Act and get all the FBI files. And this was one of the intake forms for George. Nice looking guy. I'm going to get to a picture here in a minute where you go, oh, he is kind of good looking. They were a handsome couple. They were the Kennedys of the outlaw world. Now, Catherine too had a record, because Catherine was a shoplifter. But Catherine was a really good PR person. She was George's PR person the moment they got married. She would go to her home in Fort Worth when he was out doing jobs, and she would throw these elaborate parties and invite the police. You got to get the police on your side. And she would invite the police, and she would give them each a shell casing from a Tommy gun. For their second anniversary, she got her husband a Tommy gun. Because nothing says, I think that's what it, I think ammo was the second anniversary. She got her husband a Tommy gun, and then went around telling everybody he's so proficient with the Tommy gun, he can carve his initials, write his initials with bullets on concrete. Not true. But then she would have parties and then pass out spent shell casings with his initials on them. People wanted that. People were excited about, I mean, this guy was a common thug, but she was making him like he was Brad Pitt. And so she had a number of aliases. Dolores was one of them, as you can see here. Is he gorgeous? I think he's gorgeous. I mean, let's take away the intake number. I know. I think he's a pretty striking guy. And he tried, he was married first. He was married to a woman named, her last name was Ramsey. And he had 2 children with her. But he didn't stick around long. He would go straight, and then he would go back into crime again. And when he started having an affair with Catherine, that's when she said, that's enough. We've got to break it off. And you're not going to be able to see the kids because you're a really bad influence. Later on in his life, when he goes to Alcatraz, he does establish a relationship with one of his boys who writes him back and forth. And I've included some of their letters in the book. Again, not letters that are just laying around. You've got to petition the federal prison system in order to get those letters that are in his file. And they're just pretty amazing. But I thought he was quite fetching. Here's her intake form. But look at that happy face. That's not somebody, I love the hair too. I mean, but that's her intake picture. Now, again, this is the dress that she would wear every day. It's a silk little number that in the evening required monkey fur. So, but this is what she wears to court. This is how she shows up in court every day after they're arrested, because finally the ransom is paid for Charles Urschel, and they let Urschel go pretty far outside of Oklahoma City, and he's got to walk himself in to his family. And so that ordeal is pretty amazing because these two people are on the run for a long time. They led the FBI on the longest chase across the United States than any other criminal has. Again, they were the first ones. After Urschel was kidnapped, the FBI says, I bet they took the Lindbergh baby. Because the way that they went into Urschel's place was the same way that somebody went in to take the Lindbergh baby. And so they made that connection. So they're the first to be accused. What's unfortunate with them is so many things, but prior to the Lindbergh baby being kidnapped, there was no federal law that says that, no federal law against you kidnapping somebody in California and taking them to Tennessee. Nobody could come and look for you in Tennessee for a kidnapping in California. But after the Lindbergh baby after they find him and he's dead, they write what is known as the federal kidnapping law or the Lindbergh Law. And the Kellys are the first to be tried under the Lindbergh Law. So even though they didn't take the Lindbergh baby, they're going to be on that receiving end of what happens when you kidnap somebody. So they're the first. They're arrested in Tennessee. The little girl that they carry with, that they kidnap and take with them, she finally gets away, and she's able to share with the police where these two people are. They're hiding out in Memphis. Now, have you ever heard that story? Don't shoot, G-Man. Have you ever heard that? Well, okay, well, you're going to hear it here tonight. That was a very famous thing. Don't shoot, G-Man. I don't want you to shoot me. They always said that George Kelly said that. That was J. Edgar Hoover beefing up his office to make it seem like they were badder than what they really were. But that didn't happen. They come into the home in Memphis to get Kelly in the middle of the night, and the poor sap is up getting ready to go to the bathroom. He's just in his boxer shorts. Catherine's in bed, and when the police come in, he holds his hand up and says, "What took you so long, G-Man?" That's really not very romantic. So Hoover takes it and twists it, where Kelly was absolutely frightened and said, "Don't shoot, G-Man." But that wasn't said, and Kelly was so annoyed when that was in the papers, and people always said that, because when they were arrested and hauled into court every morning, you could hear in unison, "Don't shoot, G-Man." Nobody ever called them G-Man until the Kelly situation. What else do I have here? Here they are in court. Again, a handsome couple. Does she have the... Yes, she does. She has the monkey fur around the sleeves. There is the monkey fur. You can't show them in court in just a silk dress. You've got to really, yeah, you got to have it all. And so they arrived in court. They were in the same jail, but in separate ends of the jail. And they did interviews all the time. People always wanted to interview. She was very happy to do interviews. George was not so open with it, but she was very thrilled with it. And then when she's being interviewed, she's happy to tell the journalist, "I had no idea he kidnapped people and he was a bad guy. He never showed that side of himself to me." And they believed it because, look at her. They believed her story, but it wasn't a word of truth in it. But George said, it doesn't matter. She's going to strike a deal because they've arrested her entire family. Her stepfather, her mother, her brother, her sister-in-law, her cousins, they're all arrested. And she's frantic that her mother has been arrested because she hates the fact that she got her mother into this situation. And so she tells him, she called George her big bear, and tells the big bear, and I only know that because I petitioned the prison for the letters, and she tells him, "I'm not going down for this, and neither is my family." And he knows what that means. So he's happy to say, "I did it all, she knew nothing." When they're going into court the very first day, they hear, "Don't shoot, G-Man." And then one of the officers makes a lewd comment about Catherine and her look. I think he said something about her behind, I can't remember. But George is so insulted about this that he strikes the officer and they whack him on the head with a billy club. So, in some of the pictures in the book, you'll see them sitting behind the bench and he's got a giant goose egg right here on his head from that beating. But again, she was just happy that she was getting all this attention and that she thought that if he said that she didn't know and she did this, she cried on the stand, that they would let her go. I think you can see, you can't really see it over there, but he had, it's going to be on that side. That's his attorney whispering to him. Again, look at her, it's very stylish, isn't it? They made sure that she had stylish clothes before she went into court every day. But they would smoke in court. I mean, they would chew gum. I mean, they had no real respect for the law at all. Well, obviously, but even here when they're in front of a jury and a judge, they don't care. They made history in this way too. They were the first gangsters to be transported by plane from where they were arrested to the place where they were going to be tried. And every day when they arrived at court, the paparazzi and all the journalists would be there taking pictures. You thought it was a movie premiere and not the two of them going to court. But they would be taken from the jail on the other side of the courthouse by car and dropped off in front of the courthouse. Now, here's what's amazing about this. George, they both get life sentences. Not just Catherine. This is Catherine here, and this is her mother. Her mother got a life sentence.
They look so much alike.
They do. But they both got life sentences. And Catherine asked if she could serve her time with her mother. So of course they're not spending the whole time in jail because she cries. And she makes a big deal about it. And I think she only serves 10 years. And they let her out. And she moves to Oklahoma City with her mother. And she works as an accountant. That's who you want to do in your books. She works as an accountant. And she dies in 1987. Isn't history amazing? We think it's so far away, but it's not. It's right there. And she just was very close to her mother. While they were in prison, they learned how to be amazing seamstresses. So part of the time, they are making curtains for Macy's, for customers at Macy's. Now, what's amazing about this story is, as I told you, that Catherine had a child. She had a daughter. Now, her daughter wanted to go to school, but how are you going to? Everybody knows who she is, and she's not being raised by her mother anyway. She's being raised by her grandparents, and she doesn't have her grandmother anymore. Boss dies not too long after this, and so she's kind of left an orphan, ready to really kind of taking care of herself. The person who pays for her way to go through school so she can become a teacher was Charles Urschel. I just think that their story is absolutely fascinating because he ends up going to, he's in Leavenworth first, then he goes to Alcatraz, and that's when he starts a relationship with one of his boys. And the letters that the two of them, Catherine and George, wrote back and forth were quite telling, and that's included in the book too. I mean, just a fascinating look at history and two gangsters who made history. It was because of what happened with these two individuals and Hoover's ability to do what he did and get the community all riled up and to spin the press that he was able to keep his job and became the hero that he becomes until later on in his life when he's in all kinds of trouble. So, Does anybody have any questions about the Kellys that maybe I can answer? Yes, ma'am.
What's the ransom?
She asked what the ransom was. The ransom was $250,000, of which they only recovered 10%. It's buried in fields in Texas and a bunch of different places. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir.
What did they convict Catherine's mother of?
Harboring a fugitive, kidnapping. They also convicted her brother and her father, boss. But because they were men and the breadwinners of the family, they weren't made to go and serve any time because they had to take care of the family. Someone had to pay the crime, and it was her mom. Yes, sir.
How did George Kelly die?
George Kelly died of natural causes. Died of a heart attack.
In prison or?
Yes, in prison. He never got out. George, I think he was in his 60s. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So what did he do with his machine gun?
The police took it because Catherine would invite the police over, and 2 law enforcement agents she thought were crooked were really not crooked. They helped bring him down too. And then I want to finish by saying that Geraldine, the little girl who is kidnapped by them and taken across country, she opens these pictures, but after a little while, her parents say, all right, that's enough. We've got a part of the ransom. We're moving to Tucson, Arizona, and we're going to run a chicken ranch. I grew up in Tucson. Chickens will die in that heat, but whatever. That's what they decide to do. And Geraldine's time on stage is replaced by another little boy, Pretty Boy Floyd's son. So that was the 30s. Yes, sir.
It says that his son was also in prison.
No.
Was he about as bad as he was?
His son wasn't in prison. His 2 boys were never in prison. They were upstanding citizens. They were not. They were not. His one son did write a book about him, but no, he was never in prison. I will just do this real quick. This is my other book that's up there. It's a lovely little non-criminal story about this great couple from the American frontier who did Wild West shows. Anybody else have any questions real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Don. Yes, ma'am.
The word ball, you only hear that in reference to Girl Scouts and gangsters?
It was a common phrase to refer to a prostitute. So like you would say courtesan, or you would say soiled dove. That was the 1930s version of prostitute. Which, it was a derogatory term, of course, that was given to her by Hoover. She was a bad egg. What can I say? Monkey fur and all. I'll be back there in the back if you guys have any questions. Thank you so much for your attention.